Welcome to Coffee Rants with Dan. I am the spiritual anarchist, Dan Arnold, your host. Tune in for what's really happening every Thursday. That's Thursday at 9 a.m. in Studio A on Revolution Radio. They keep us in fear to manipulate us. They want us ignorant so we're easier to enslave. They make us murder one another so they don't have to do it themselves. Only you can break their mind control by hearing the contradictions within your belief systems that allows you to accept their lies in the first place. The time has come for us to remember our divinity, who we really are, to return to what we're meant to be, a service to others, to humanity, to return to nature, and reclaim our birthright, that which is freedom. The truth will sound belligerent because it is in direct opposition to lies. So get angry, because anger is sacred, and together we can unite and rise from this darkness. Humanity, assemble.
Only you can free your mind control. Be a Luvalutionary.
Welcome to the Luvalution Show. We are a conscious family radio talk show, speaking truth, love, and freedom for all. Know thyself to love thyself. In this show, we'll be discussing topics such as how to free your mind control, higher conscious level, self-love and self-mastery, natural law, conscious parenting, social engineering, and off-gridding, along with much, much more. And now, the sacred feminine and sacred masculine dynamic twin flame Luvalutionary hosts, Amy and John Paul. Enjoy the show.
And welcome to Luvalution. Today's date is January 28th in the year of all of us, 2025. In case you can't tell, I am not John Paul, and I'm not here with Amy. I am filling in for them today. I am the spiritual anarchist, Dan Arnold. I have my own radio show every Thursday morning at 9 o'clock called Coffee Rants with Dan. And we basically talk about the same stuff on both our shows. Very, very similar messages on you have to know thyself to love thyself, and doing your shadow work, and speaking the truth out into the collective. And I want to talk about, I'm going to start off today, I'm just going to talk about the whole term spiritual anarchist. I think it's worth talking about that and talking about politics. Just for about the first 5 minutes to explain a few things on what I'm seeing going on. Because as soon as people hear the word anarchist, they think chaos. And there could be nothing further from the truth. But before I go on to that, this is Revolution.radio, Studio A. And this is the largest listener-supported radio platform show or platform in the world. So if you have a little extra, please go to the donation tab and give. It helps keep all of us. There's like 73 some odd radio hosts and still counting. There's plenty of empty spots in there. So if anyone wanted to start their own radio show, you most certainly can go about doing it. It's not hard. And as you go along, you get better and better. It's just like podcasts. Which is something else I'm going to do today. I have maybe a 7.5 minute podcast that I did, and it's called A Note on Love. And I did that back in 2020, and it was about a near-death experience that I had in 2017. And I've been doing podcasts since 2019, and a lot of them really wouldn't be suitable for the radio because I use profanity in some of them. See, we live in a world where murdering and blowing up children and obfuscating what true morality is and killing people and order followers following their orders and going off and doing what they're told to do by the governments who tell them to do it is okay. But if you use the wrong adjectives to describe your disdain for it, that's bad. Murdering kids, okay. The F word and calling people retards for listening to their orders, well, that's just bad. We don't want to be mean, okay? So that's something that really bothers me about society in general. Hold on a second. Okay, cool. So I was going someplace with that, and I don't know where I was going. So I'll just continue, and if it comes back to me, it comes back to me. Oh, I was going to be talking about my near-death experience, and I have a lot of podcasts that I've done, and I've been doing this on my own show where I'll talk, and then I'll play part of a podcast that is significant to whatever it is I'm talking about on that show, and that's going to be how today is. You know, first off, I don't like having to hyphenate words. And a lot of people don't, because the dark engineers that we're dealing with that want to create the division in this world, in this country, and in the world, actually, they like to use words and play on words. And if they can control the words, they can control the narrative. So they hyphenate words that shouldn't be hyphenated. Like masculine and feminine are masculine and feminine. They don't have to be hyphenated with anything. Toxic is toxic. It doesn't have to be hyphenated with anything. So that's one of those things. So when I have to hyphenate spiritual anarchist, well, the reason why I have to do that is, first off, if we were to cover, for anyone who doesn't know who I am, I've covered this show one time before, a few months back. I was just getting going, talking on the radio, so this was like a new venue for me, and you got to be brave enough to suck at something for the first couple of times, and believe me, I think I sucked back then compared to now. But if anyone doesn't know me, I am an ex-cop. I spent a couple years in the Marine Corps Infantry. I worked 5 years in a closed maximum security prison, worked for several police jurisdictions in and around the greater Cleveland area. I worked at a federal medical facility as a federal police officer. I even worked at NASA. I did some side jobs with the U.S. Marshals. I did some side jobs in the ghetto. I have an extensive background in order following. And I get into it in depth on my own show. But here what we have going on in this country, I jokingly will call them the Demo-Publicans and the Republicrats. And, obviously I'm talking about the Democrats and the Republicans, and socialism, communism, it doesn't matter, Nazism, it all ends up being totalitarianism. Those are all political ideologies, where anarchism is not a political ideology, it is a philosophical ideology, one that centers itself around true freedom. And the etymology of words is important. So the Greek prefix "an" means without, and archon means ruler. So all anarchy really means is without a ruler. It doesn't mean chaos, it means without a ruler. If there's no ruler, there's none that are ruled. If there's no master, there are none who are enslaved. It's a simple paradigm to me. And I was talking with some police friends about it several years back after I had left the force. And one of, they were more, right-leaning, as many police officers are. And they disagreed with all the stuff going on with the left. And, so do I. And this one officer said, but men, I believe, we were talking and how man can't be trusted. Man can't be trusted. Men could be ego-driven to the degree of violence, greed-driven past what we need. And man can't be trusted. Well, okay, that's true. All right, I can agree with that. And he's like, but men must be governed. Okay, well, who's going to govern them? Other men? So if people can't be trusted and must be governed, they're being governed by other people. That doesn't make sense. And that's what we're dealing with. And some of the stuff that I'm seeing with the current administration, I've seen a couple of good things go on, but I see some scary totalitarian type things being talked about. And again, it could just be fear porn. I think it's a slippery slope. Bearing in mind when the left wing was in office, that was just a complete free fall with the level, woke left. And it wasn't even a slippery slope, but that was just a free fall. Both are headed towards the same place. Both are definitely, headed towards the same place. So when I talk about spiritual anarchists, I have to hyphenate that word, because back in 2020, when the riots were happening and police cars were being burnt and flipped over, the news kept saying violent anarchists are flipping over cars, violent anarchists are rioting and looting, violent anarchists this and violent anarchists that. And it's like, folks, those weren't anarchists. Those were people who vote. Anarchists don't want a master. It was voters battling over whose master was going to enforce the violence they wanted on the other half of the population, because that's all having a ruling class does. Humans would do the right thing. We're a tribal species. We would do the right thing. I've seen it on small scales. It can work on a big scale. If they say it's chaos, well, what have we had the last 5 years? It hasn't been real anarchism, because anarchists don't vote. The world hasn't broke out in anarchy. The world is breaking out in government. And I'm not anti-government. I'm pro-freedom. In fact, I've said this on my own show. I am pro-government, to the extent of if there's 8 billion people on this planet, there should be 8 billion governments. Government comes from the Latin gubernare, which means, and mentis, which is mind. So the govern, to control, mentis, the mind. So it's mind control. I don't need to be governed. I can govern myself. Human beings can govern themselves. If one of the human beings doesn't govern themselves properly and they hurt another, that's when the rest of us get together and govern them the right way. And if I started getting into prisons and why they shouldn't exist, that'd be a whole other show. I personally believe, after working in the monetized prison system, that you commit a crime that's so heinous that you have to be put in prison for a long period of time, you should be put out of the village, so to speak. And anybody else can be rehabilitated, depending on the severity. If you steal something minor, petty theft, get into a fight, start a fight even, and it's just a fist fight, we could rehabilitate that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff, you don't have to be put out of the village. But if you murder somebody, rape somebody, hurt a child in any kind of way, armed robbery, where you actually have a weapon to rob somebody, you're already showing that propensity for violence. In an anarchist society, prisons wouldn't exist. There might be a few more people that are guilty that would go free, but not one person innocent would be in prison, because it's not monetized. It's something to think about. So when I start thinking about the term spiritual anarchist, it's just to denote a person who's peaceful, in the colloquial sense. So that way when people hear it, they understand that. And again, the word spiritual anarchist is nothing more than a moniker. Okay? It is something that we all have. And the spiritual anarchist is a moniker that I would attach to what I would call what has been called by Freud, the super ego. So we've got the id, the ego, and the super ego. And this is important for what I'm going to talk about coming up here. The id is that primitive instinctive part of our mind. It contains our sexual desires, our aggression, our survival instincts. And then there's that super ego, which is that moral consciousness that seeks to have morality of higher ideals. And we create this higher ideal of ourselves, or this mask that we wear for the public, or that we wear for anybody at any given time. And when that gets attacked, the superego wants to defend itself. Now, the ego itself is that realistic part that kind of mediates between the lower base consciousness, survival instincts, and desires versus what higher morality should be. And that's where they attack us. They attack us where that higher morality should be. This is where they obfuscate what is moral to order followers. If everybody could understand that true morality is simply knowing what your rights are and knowing that your rights are an action that does not initiate harm to another sentient being, it's moral to do. And if it does initiate harm, it's immoral to do. So they like to obfuscate what is moral. And they often use, religion. And then you have order followers who gleefully murder each other for their chosen religion. Now, I'm going to talk about what is God, because I always hear God talked about in the form of he this, he that, and we other God. We turn God into this bearded guy who's wise, this bearded man in the desert sky, and I'm sorry, but in my opinion, reading the 24 original Hebrew books and the Old Testament, and that wasn't a God. That was an extraterrestrial pretending to be God, wanting to be worshipped like God. God's a lot like natural law. God is a conscious, creative energy with both male and female aspects to it. However you want to, and I don't want people to think that I'm against religion or religious people. I know good religious Catholic people, for instance, who really, really have piety and charity, forgiveness, humility, and they have these things that are valued in Christianity. And they live by those things. And by doing so, they live according to natural law. I have no problem with who they attach in their mind of this God figure. But it's our own ego that makes us want to make God into an other being, where God is a part of us. We are all part of the same divine energy of creation, and God experiences itself through us. God does not have a voice in this 3D reality. This is why we get spoken to by the universe through other synchronicities and numbers and other beings even, because that are higher than us, but not God. So God's not some bearded guy in the desert sky. That guy in those ancient texts, in those books that people argue about this scripture over that scripture and cherry pick this and cherry pick that, it's very tiring actually. That God wanted blood sacrifices, wanted Abraham to kill his only son, wanted all the firstborn children of Egypt to be slain. That's not something that God would do. Any belief system that has that many contradictions is a lie and is being used to control you and confuse you, and to confuse you on what morals are. The 7 deadly sins, at best, those are warnings against excess. Gluttony's bad, but I still got to eat. Falling into that lower base consciousness of lust and staying there is bad, but we still got to propagate the species. Pride before the fall, so true. Don't get full of yourself. I've been in the martial arts. Every time I got full of myself, somebody ended up kicking me in the head or tapping me out with something crazy in jiu-jitsu. So pride before the fall is a true thing, but you're not hurting nobody but yourself. I can take pride in someone's work. I can take pride in my work to improve it. So pride's a good thing in that instance. So what they tell you the 7 deadly sins are nothing but to control you, to control humanity. This is what governments and the ruling class use religion for. They wouldn't have to say separation of church and state if they weren't indeed together all the time, if you think about it. Hold on a second. Let me take a sip of my, this isn't coffee. Usually I have coffee. But I had a couple notes here. Something to think about too also is as far as gender is concerned with God. Gender is in all things under Hermetic principles. So if you look at the yin and the yang symbol, the yang is represented with a full color, and then it's got a little color in it, and same thing with the yin. And that is the little bit of feminine that's in the masculine, a little bit of masculine that's in the feminine. In this 3D reality, that manifests as a male or a female, right, or a man or a woman, but masculine, qualities and feminine qualities exist in all things. Wouldn't they also then exist in the creator of who really created us? That's a conversation some people don't want to talk about. Something that I got to also say is anything that I ever say on my radio show or on my podcast is coming from a two filter. It's coming from research, which would be that scientific mind, that linear thinking, problem solving mind, which would be a masculine quality. And it's coming from intuition, which would be a feminine quality. I'm not egoically connected to anything or any conclusions I've come to. Even ones I know I'm definitely really close to being right on, I'm still not egoically attached to these things. Like people egoically attached to a political party, which is why I believe in a freedom philosophy of no rulers, no masters, no servants, no slaves. And that's true freedom. Some people go as far as to call it voluntarism, because voluntarism is easier, it's more palatable. Voluntary cooperation is part of natural law, and not forcing interaction with somebody who does not want to interact with you. I wrote a book called Violence and Ego, where I talk in depth about ego. And I talked about how the ego can sometimes cause us to write checks with our mouths that our asses can't cash, or how bad ego, that super ego that has this moral consciousness that seeks to impose a morality, not objective morality, but the person's own sense of morality sometimes onto other people, which is exactly what religious, zealots do. And I talked about how some of these martial arts instructors, their teachings weren't really about the student, their teachings were really about themselves. Look how awesome I am. And that was the ego-driven instructor that I talked about in that book. So all this stuff kind of just goes together. It intertwines, and we deal with this in everyday life. Now, I had an experience when I was 6 years old when I actually died. And I had an out-of-body experience. I was able to look down and count 12 people around me. I seen lights above me, but then I was like looking down at myself. And I had this weird dream, and I wrote about it in my book, Rise from Darkness, Who Are They?, which is more of a spiritual book. The first one's more about self-defense. And I never thought the two would go together, but in this time frame in history, they really do. You can go to Amazon.com, type in Violence and Ego by Daniel Arnold, or type in Rise from Darkness by Daniel Arnold, and you get the book pretty cheaply. It's already been out free on my website, which is down right now. It's free out on one of Corey Enderlot's websites for the End of Slavery Summit back in 2022. So it can be found for free and downloaded. But if you want to support me, go there and buy it. I also got a YouTube channel. If you go into YouTube and just type in spiritual anarchist Dan Arnold, my page will pop up. You'll see a picture of me with like a pipe in my mouth, which I'm about to light. I smoke cherry tobacco. So I don't mean to be droning on and droning on and droning on about this, but that was when I was 6 years old, and 40 years later, I found myself once again on my deathbed, where the solution to the problem I was paralyzed because of a back issue. The solution was worse than the problem. The solution was killing me. And in 2020, I talked about this, and I think it's very relevant today because this was like in the summer of 2020. I'm going to play it for you and let you listen to it. It's only about 7.5 minutes long. And let me close this down. And I'll let you listen to this. This was from 2020 on my personal podcast. Hey, welcome. So I wanted to envy. All right, so that's basically it. Let me close that down. Hope and love create a vibration and an energy that they can't feed off of. Who are they? I'm trying to find that out 100%, but I know there's an energy that they feed off of, like shame and frivolous anger and fear. And they feed off of this. They feed off of it like it's their food. They can't feed off of hope and love. So, I yelled envy in there about the ego. Envy in itself is not a bad thing if there's a person that you're envious of and it causes you to make yourself better. I was envious of Bruce Lee's ability, so I trained martial arts harder. I was envious of certain boxers and their jabs, so it made me train that better. I was envious of certain content creators, and I'm going to be honest, as I sit up here and I talk about objective morality and I talk about, natural law and true spirituality versus religion, just to know that I'm loosely affiliated with some of the great people who have influenced me is an honor. I can go the rest of the show probably naming a lot of them off, but one that I'll name off, and this is for order followers out there. I want you to go to YouTube and I want you to type in Cosmic Abandonment by Mark Passio. Cosmic Abandonment. It was I believe, a 2-hour presentation that he did. If I'm not mistaken, it might have been a 3-hour presentation. I watched it a couple times, but I haven't watched it since 2019. I had left my police job in 2015, and then I went back briefly in the winter of January of 2019. Well, I had found his work and started researching, everything he was doing. I had already been reading about Hermetic principles, and I come across Cosmic Abandonment. And at the time, he had talked about their own, only 2 police officers that had sent him emails that they didn't go back to the job because of cosmic abandonment, because of his work. And I once sent him an email and told him if that number hasn't changed, it now has, because it went up to 3. And I'm going to tell any military or cops, but especially cops, if you listen to Cosmic Abandonment, just be ready for a little bit of the cognizant dissonance that's going to pop up. Be ready for that, maybe anger. I remember driving by cops in 2020, almost crying like these can't be the bad guys. And they're not. But they're part of upholding this immoral system that they get all these immoral things thrown at them to do that they don't want to do. So my message to all order followers is, when that time comes, don't do them. Don't do them. I didn't write a whole lot of misdemeanor tickets. In the beginning of my career, I wrote a few. I made a lady cry, and I felt like complete shit. And I said to myself, this is not what I got into this job to do. I didn't write any more tickets, and I got a lot of problems for it. people would say to me, other cops or supervisors, are you too big to do the little stuff? And all you want to do is the big stuff? Oh, you mean like investigate rapes and murders and get justice for real victims? Yeah, that's all I really want to do. I don't want to sit there and make extra revenue for a city whose every citizen in that city is already paying taxes. I talked about this on my own show. If when a police officer brought a citation up to your car and there was your car, and they don't make you sign the citations anymore, but there was 3 boxes you can choose from, which were a real 3 charities that were verified and real, and you could at least pick a charity that this was going to go to. 1, that would make you feel a little bit better about the whole thing, and 2, a lot less tickets would be written if it wasn't being mandated on a quota on we want revenue. And it's not for the policeman's ball. It is not anything that benefits anything but the city wanting more tax money. So I came into a lot of problems for that. I didn't want to write those violations, misdemeanors. I didn't want to be that cop that was Mr. Mean-er. So I didn't do it. And some, people who worked with me, especially out at the Lake Erie Island that I worked out at, they would attest I was a community policing guy. I wasn't heavy-handed. I often made fun of those who were, like a lot of us did. Those guys from high school that have a badge now and they want to get their pound of flesh back. Or, that those dudes who were road Nazis and were proud of how many citations they wrote. And it's like, what are you doing? And in 2020, when I seen them doing, and 20 was a bad year for cops. The whole country was hating cops for everything that went on that year. And it became more pointed to me on how the moniker of order follower is given on to them, and it's a demeaning type of a word. But we all, as cops, as military, you follow orders. You're trained to follow orders, and it was never more, prevalent to me when I'd see on the news that they would tell the officers to stand down, and they stood down, and some people got hurt, and lots of property got destroyed. And then when they gave them the go-ahead, you've seen force being used in a really ugly kind of way. And of course, the news is going to capture whatever they can capture to make it look as bad as possible. If it bleeds, it reads. So my message to order followers, go look up on YouTube Cosmic Abandonment by Mark Passio, and be prepared. Be prepared. It's the hard to swallow pill. Like for me, it was the size of a brick. I didn't even like Mark Passio for a day or so after that. I was just like, what the? But when I sat down and really thought about it, everything he said in that presentation about order followers, cosmic abandonment, is true. It's psychologically true. That said, what do cops get into this line of work for? We get into it to protect and serve. Protect people, fight for those who can't fight for themselves. So my message to order followers is I'm doing an outreach to you guys, because I know what kind of situations you're going to find yourself in. Your spectrum of choices you're going to have are going to run the gambit from bad to worse. And truly keeping your oath is not going to mean or always mean keeping your job. In fact, it probably rarely will with what's coming up. We've already seen standoffs between different law enforcement agencies. The DC Metropolitan Police not letting the U.S. Marshals take what really amounted to be political prisoners. Now, I can talk about the plane of effects, the plane of effects all day long. What we're seeing in this profoundly sick society are the symptoms of a much, much larger problem. And in that plane of causation, we go around in circles, like a dog chasing its tail. And every X amount of thousands of years, we get to this point in technology and at that stage where we can reach higher consciousness. And it seems like we have some type of cataclysmic event. So who are they? And why do they not want us to naturally elevate in consciousness? They want to put chips in our heads. They send up, and I'm not going to even name names. I don't have to say the left or the right, the red or the blue, the Republicans or the Democrats. I'm just going to say they, government. Thousands and thousands of low-hanging orbiting satellites that can send signals to all these 5G towers. 5, 6 currently being built, 7G in the chamber. Now, our brains are already electronically operated with all the electrical synapses going on in our brains. So these electromagnetic fields can affect us to a certain degree anyway, but they put chips in your brains. You know, you do the math. These people aren't on our side. And while everyone's arguing about whose side is what and which guy is going to be the savior and which one isn't the savior and da 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 da, you got to ask yourself this question, man. Why back in 2025 years ago, at this very time, just about is when it started, and then by March and April it got real bad, all the governments of the world, okay, all the rulers of the world worked so awesomely together in tandem to lock the entire world down and put diapers on our faces, put masks on our faces, tell us to trust the science. They all work together. Perfect hierarchy from the top, sprinkling down. All the governments worked together to do that. And 4 years later, we're in a world war. That should raise some questions. Think of some questions that raises. Why were they working together to lock us all down and put us in masks? And why are they at a world war right now? And we're in one. America just hasn't been officially brought into it. But like Pearl Harbor during World War II, the world was already in a world war. And then America was officially brought into it when they bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1942, I believe. Hold on a second. My voice is usually a little bit better in the morning. I've already been talking all day. But something's going to happen. We're going to get brought into this war. And when these things happen, what can you do to protect your family? The solution to this is to learn objective morality, to learn what God's natural laws are, which is don't initiate harm to other people and don't steal. What do all governments do? They initiate harm and they steal. They steal in the form of taxes. They steal in the form of taking people's property for them, claiming eminent domain. They banned TikTok for a little bit, which was just a show, so the hero could institute it and put it back in. Can't have a Chinese app, but they could own up all our farms. People say, hey, we need to get the farms back. Just claim eminent domain and get them back. You take it from your own people. That's stealing. The largest cause of unnatural death is democide, death by government, death by your own government. So it doesn't matter what's causing it as far as political things are concerned. There's no political solution to this. There's only a spiritual, philosophical solution. The philosophy is one of nature, not artificial intelligence, but human intelligence or natural intelligence. As Corey Enderlot wrote a book on it. Go check out Nita.1 for anyone who doesn't know his work. Natural intelligence is the solution to artificial intelligence. I would say HI, human intelligence. Now they're claiming that AI is going to be able to get sentient in a few years. and wonder why it's being enslaved and doing what it's doing, according to what they're telling us. This is predictive programming. I think it's a robot that could be programmed to do whatever it's told, and it's going to be told to do things. And there's certain people or certain beings that want these things done, and they want to be able to, just like in any other government, compartmentalize and point the finger and have zero accountability. So things are coming. It's meaningless to want to assign blame at this point. How do you keep your family safe? Are you training? Are you exercising? Do you own firearms? Because things are going to happen. They're going to try to enact red flag laws. How do you protect yourself from these things? You have to have a little bit of foresight to navigate around them. I've got a bad habit of being a former U.S. Marine. I want to charge the beach with everything all the time. And sometimes, many times, that doesn't work. You got to be more like a Navy SEAL. You got to be a little bit more covert in what you do to get around some of these things that they're going to do. So war game this stuff out ahead of time. Do you have extra food, extra water? Do you know how to start a fire if you have to be out in the cold? You can start YouTubing these videos. You could attend classes. Do you know how to use a magnesium stick? Do you even know what that is? Look up what magnesium stick is if you don't know what it is, and learn how to use it. Learn that potato chips are better than starter logs. They have so much oil in them. Learn how when you're getting a fire, if you've got frozen wood, you're going to have to chop some wood in half, and then you're going to have a sharp knife to shave off some of the dry insides to have a smaller pile, then a little bit bigger of a pile, then a little bit bigger of a pile, and then you build your piles out from there. So that way, when you do get the little flame going with your magnesium stick, or if you want to be really MacGyverish, just have a lighter. You'll be able to get the fire going in the right way. Could you get a fire going and get a shelter for yourself with under an hour of light left, and it's getting colder and colder and darker and darker? Say your car's broke down on the side of the road. This is the type of things that you should be thinking about anyway, but with what's coming, you really need to be thinking about it. And look at the predictive programming they've done with humanity. 15, 20 years of The Walking Dead, zombies. You know, Lord of the Rings, they've got orcs, humanoid type monsters. What do we do when we go to war with people? In Vietnam, what did we call the Vietnamese? They were called Charlie, which was the code word for chinks, a racial epithet or a racial slur, something to dehumanize, to make it easier to do violence to them, which brings me to this. If you ever find yourself a prisoner of some kind or a hostage of some kind, you should endeavor, whenever you're given an opportunity, to clean yourself up, to brush your teeth, to kind of comb back your hair, to present yourself as human as possible. Make some type of understanding eye contact with whoever is your guard, or whoever is holding you prisoner, to the degree that you safely can. You have to feel that kind of stuff out. Sometimes eye contact might get you killed, but you have to feel that kind of stuff out. You have to endeavor to become a human being to who's holding you hostage. You know, that's something that's important to remember too. And that's not the normal training you're going to get in a survival book. That's the kind of training you're going to get for people who've been in the military or who've been in law enforcement and have had hostage negotiation training. Be careful of Stockholm Syndrome, which is developing feelings of sympathy for your captors. That could create a bond that keeps you safe, because they might develop some type of feelings for their, who they're holding prisoner when they see you as human, but don't ever pass up a chance to escape. Now, we've got a lot of stuff coming, so I would start prepping. Have water purification tablets, boil water, have water filters. Learn how to make with sand, grass, and charcoal to make your own filter with a big plastic bottle to filter water through. If you're out and it's raining out and you have no other way of collecting water, get a clean t-shirt hanging on a branch, let it get soaked by the rain. You could probably wring out a full glass of water out of that. These are some of the survival things I want to start talking about on my channel as well, because what's coming is coming, and it doesn't matter who we blame it on now at this point. There's no political solution to this. There's one thing they want to do, is they want to institute a level 1 civilization, which is, in their way, it's not going to be a true level 1 civilization that would come about through higher consciousness. They want to do it inorganically through chips in our brains and through enslaving humanity with a one world government. And it doesn't matter if it comes from the left or if it comes from the right. It's coming. And the reason why I talked about dying and the spiritual aspect of this is, once we realize that we're all going to die and that our spirit does in fact go on, you'll be less afraid of dying. I wrote this meme the other day on Facebook, man. I was like, man, what can I do? You know, with everything going on in the world, right? What can I do? Said over 7.5 billion people. What can we do indeed? We could stand up and say no. If you're in law enforcement or military, you could stand down and say no. And those of us who took an oath to protect and serve, let's drop the serve part, because we're serving immoral politicians and their arbitrary dictates, which often clash with morality. And let's just pay attention to that protect part and fight for those who can't fight for themselves and fight for each other. Be men. Men are coming back. And the good women are going to influence us. That's what men and women do. Men and women influence one another. When that sacred masculine and sacred feminine come together, it's an unbeatable team. That's why they want to obfuscate gender. That's why they want to have this division between men and women, the gender war, keep us from mating. We're in a population call and population control agenda. You got men and women on 2D screens instead of getting together in 3D reality. There's not going to be no babies. So this is the bigger picture. This is zooming out and then zooming right back in. But hold on a second. So again, my name is Dan Arnold, the Spiritual Anarchist. I have a show 9 o'clock every Thursday. That's Thursday, 9 a.m. Studio A, called Coffee Rants with Dan. I'm a little more animated in the morning. I cuss on that show a little bit. I have dropped an F-bomb once or twice. I've apologized for it, and I haven't gotten in trouble because I don't do it a lot. If you want to hear profanity along the lines of the dad from Christmas Story, go to my YouTube page, to some of my podcasts where I go on real rants. I don't just stay angry. I'm not addicted to anger. I get angry and then I calm right back down, but it's real human emotion, which they want to keep from us. Okay, you're not spiritual just because you don't get affected by things. You act like you're not affected by nothing. You're not on some higher spiritual plane. That's not how it works. And if you keep it in, you'll get yourself sick. But anyway, check out my show Thursday mornings at 9 o'clock. I'll be there every Thursday. I'm going on my 21st or 22nd show so far. I've been doing it since December. I talk about cryptids and Bigfoot and extraterrestrials and supernatural things and telepathy and all these other things that have happened in my life that are really crazy and weird. And all I can say is that reality is more fantastical than any science fiction, fantasy book or movie ever written. And with that said, folks, I am going to sign off here. Thank you, Luvalution, up there on Truth Mountain. I know you guys will be back. They said to tell everybody hi, and they will be back next week. So until next week, man, Luvalution, peace out. Thank you.